Hi, I'm John LeBlanc from PD. In this video, you'll see how Beau packs a Spectre. You'll find good hints and tips on how to make that go easily, and we hope you find it helpful.
Hey everybody, we're here today to pack a performance design Spectre. This specific one is a 190, but this pack job goes for any Spectre out there. Okay, so the first step of the pack job is to make sure your brakes are stowed. Pretty simple, by just pulling the steering line through the guide ring and then putting the top of the toggle through the loop, just like that, and then stowing the top of the toggle in the keeper and the bottom of the toggle. When you do that, make sure that you don't have many twists in the lines. If you notice that you have a bunch of twists in your steering lines, take those twists out before stowing. And then neatly stow the excess on the back of the riser, or however your risers are supposed to be stowed. Okay, from here I'm going to do a continuity check, and that involves just separating the steering lines and the riser groups in my fingers, and then running up the lines to the parachute. For the rest of this pack job, I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure away from the rig, and I want to keep these lines nice and taut if I can. Here, if I notice that I have any step throughs or line overs, anything twisted or weird like that, I'm just going to fix that, but since this one looks good, I'm going to proceed with the pack job. I choose to pack with all the lines over one shoulder. Some people will separate it, pack with them like this. It's up to you. This is just my preferred method. Again, you want to make sure that you don't have any slack in the lines, so pull that slack up, get it towards the canopy so that the lines can be nice and taut, then always apply a little bit of pressure away from the canopy, or away from the rig, excuse me. Next up, I'm going to count my cells. So this is a Spectre. Spectre is a 7-cell parachute. So I'm going to turn the canopy sideways, and I'm going to count out my 7 cells at the nose. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, I'm going to separate those. I'm going to kind of grab them and hold them off to the side here. And this part I do to just help the fabric lay in place. Here we can easily see our different line groups between our A lines, our B lines, and then our C, D, and steering lines are back here. So I just give it a little shake like that, help the fabric lay in place a bit to help with the flaking. And then I'm going to turn the canopy back towards the center, and I'm going to put the nose of the parachute right in between my knees. The next part of the pack job is flaking. What flaking means is where you're getting the lines to the center and the fabric to the outside. So you're flaking in between your A and your B lines, your B and your C lines, and your C and your D lines. So the first step, I just pick a side, left or right side. I'm going to start on the left side, and I'm going to separate my A lines and my B lines. So if I get this stabilizer out of the way, I can look in here and I can see my 4 A lines, which is going to be 4 on each side because it's a 7-cell. So my 4 A lines right here, my 4 B lines are down here a little bit more. And I'm just going to take my hand, split the A and the B lines, and then give it a nice kind of snake out to the side, or a chop, whatever you want to do to get that fabric to the side and keep the lines to the inside. All right, so I've got that nice fabric to the side. You've got your nice logo right here. Just above the logo, or towards you, you're going to see this seam. It's from my perspective, it looks like a V. For you people watching, it might more look like a mountaintop. But what the point is to run your hands straight down from that seam and push against your leg. That's going to get some of the air out of the canopy, as well as help to create a nice fold right here. Next up, I'm going to flake between my B and my C lines. You'll notice that I left the slider down here rather than putting it up over my shoulder. And the reason for that is simple. I just use it as a packing aid. The slider, the front grommets and the rear grommets denote where the B lines and the C lines are. So it's pretty easy to separate your slider grommets, push the slider to the side, and then just automatically know right where to flake to get in between your B and your C lines. So just separating that, putting my hand right down there, flaking all that fabric right in between our slider grommets. And then again, I've got that same seam. It's our line attachment points, and that seam, I'm just going to run my hands down it, try and push some of the air out, make that fold lay nice and flat, And then the last flake that we do on this side is between our C and our D lines. But with a lot of canopies, it can get kind of confusing because there's steering lines down here also, so it's kind of tough to tell which are our C lines, which are our D lines. So what I like to do is just get the steering lines out of the way. The way I do that is to follow this from the slider stop, which is right here, it's this puck. I'm going to follow the binding tape around the stabilizer. I'm going to keep going down past this D line right here. Keep going down towards the tail of the canopy until I get to my first steering line. Just keep running along the seam. There's my second steering line. Run along the seam. There's my third steering line. And just keep running along the seam. There's your fourth steering line. Spectre's got 4 steering lines. Hold them out of the way. It's a little bit easier now to tell which are our 4 D lines and which are our 4 C lines. So now I can easily find the fabric to flake in between our C's and our D's. Boom. Pretty nice on the left side. I'm going to repeat the exact same thing on the right side. So I get this in place. So the Spectre is a great canopy for, it's known for its really nice, soft, gentle openings. It's an easy flying parachute. It's easy to maneuver. It's easy to handle. It's got really nice landings. It comes in a variety of sizes from 230 all the way down to 97. So you can get a big variety of Spectre sizes. Okay, now that I've got all the fabric flaked on the Spectre, I'm going to quarter the slider. So that involves me just taking my hands, I'm going to run them kind of like this in between my front grommets and my rear grommets of the slider. That quarters it side to side, just kind of like that, making sure that fabric is neat down in there. And then I'm going to quarter the slider front to back. So with that, I'm going to release the nose from my knees. I'm going to turn the parachute, and I'm going to grab the slider, pull it out the nose of the parachute just by the width of this tape. Spectre has beautiful openings, so we recommend just leaving it just as is. Don't do anything to the nose, don't roll it or anything like that. Quarter the slider out just this much, and then make sure that on the tail side you haven't pulled it too far towards the nose, and you should have nice, soft, easy, consistent, dreamy openings on this thing. Last thing I'm going to do is just take a hand and help push that slider fabric down in the parachute. Doesn't matter left hand or right hand. Just to get that slider fabric deep down in that canopy as well. Here I'm just going to make sure that there's no lines flopping over any fabric. Looks pretty good, ready to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab the tail of the canopy. So I like to just take all the lines right here, lift it up, reach around. Make sure that you have the center cell, which is the one with the warning label on all PD canopies. And then I'm going to kind of gently pull that center cell up and hold it right there. And then I'm going to take my knees, I'm going to kind of plop them on the side like this so that I can help hold the rest of the fabric in place as I pull the top skin around. And then before I close up the tail, I'll just make sure that that slider is nice in place, that the nose is nice and symmetrical. Looks good. From here, I want to pinch the tail seams together as I run my hands down. And that's going to allow me to fold it up. Only about 2 or 3 folds of the tail right here. The less, the better, honestly. We roll the tail right there to help us with the cocooning process. But once this canopy has come out of the bag, we want that tail to open up so that the slider can grab the air and then control the rest of the opening. So I just choked up on the canopy a little bit, brought it up my shoulder a little bit. That's going to allow me to push some of the air out of the parachute before I lay it down. This is just helping kind of with later steps. It's something I try and do on every parachute, no matter what size it is, because it just makes it a little bit easier once you lay the canopy on the ground. So I'm just going to run my hands down like this. Cool. If you notice that you have a bunch of, if you notice that you have fabric bunched up here at the warning label, go ahead and try and smooth that out, because the fabric that's bunched up is going to rub against itself when it's when it's deploying or when it's opening, and over time that can cause a weakness in that area and damage the fabric. So we want it to try and be smooth, just like this. And then once I feel ready, I'm going to lay down the parachute on the ground, lay it down softly so that we don't mess up all the flaking and our slider placement. I just lay the parachute over my forearm and then right down to the ground. Before I get down on the ground, I like to cock the pilot chute. So you do that by grabbing the hacky or the handle, whatever you've got on the end of your pilot chute. Put your foot on the deployment bag right next to the pilot chute attachment at the top of the canopy, and then pull. And then I just confirm that it's cocked and ready to go by pulling it around in the air like that to make sure that it inflates. Throughout the bagging process, I'm going to be focusing on controlling the slider. So I know that the slider grommets are about right here. So I'm just going to take my knees and either put them on top or just to the side of the slider grommets, just trying to hold them in place. Just kind of like that, pinching them down. I know that my slider is coming up here, so the tighter I can get this top skin as I cocoon it, the more it's going to hold that slider fabric in place, keeping the slider all the way up against the slider stops. So the way that I like to get the air out of the parachute is to just use my forearm, place it on the canopy, slide it up, pushing the air that direction, about 6 to 8 inches, and then I use my other hand to try and kind of wrap some of that fabric under the tight area that I just made. And then I just repeat on the other side. I take my right forearm, push it up, left hand goes under, sweep it under, hold it tight. And I just repeat that up the parachute. Forearm down, 6 to 8 inches up, using my right hand to just sweep some of that fabric under there, and then repeat on the left side. We want to try and make this top skin fabric as tight as possible, like I just said, because not only is it going to control the slider better, but it's also going to help us with the rest of the pack job. The looser the fabric is, the harder it is to control. The tighter the fabric is, the easier it is to control. Once I get up here, I can kind of just take my forearm, push some of the air out like that, and then keep repeating my way up the canopy. I'm trying to avoid laying on the parachute also, just to minimize the amount of sweat that I get on the canopy. All right, once we get here, looks pretty good. I'm not gonna worry about this fluff up here right now. I'll address that later. I'm mostly concerned about keeping this top skin nice and tight in here. We want our cocoon about the width of our D-bag. A little bit wider is okay. Looks pretty good to me. So at this point, I'm going to take my right hand, I'm going to replace control of the slider grommets, and I'm going to take my left shin and put it up here where my left hand is. So now I'm applying a bit of pressure with my shin downwards as well as away from the rig. That keeps this top skin nice and tight. That combined with the pressure down here should hold everything in place pretty easily. One thing that I try and tell people to do is avoid losing control of the parachute. Avoid getting off of it. Always remain pressure on the canopy. Always try and keep it under control, because the second that you give this thing any space, if I took my left shin off right now, all this fabric is just going to start blowing up outwards, and it's going to be a nightmare to try and do these S-folds. So my biggest recommendation for doing S-folds is just keep control of the fabric and don't give up on it. So here I'm going to do this first S-fold by taking my right hand, pinching the slider grommets, which are right here. I can feel them. They're still against the slider stops. I'm going to take my left hand and do this S-fold to about the top of the warning label here. This is a good general rule of thumb, top of the warning label. On this Spectre, you can also see this white binding tape right here. We want our S-fold to come roughly to that white binding tape. If it's a little bit down from it, that's okay. So I'm going to do my first S fold right about there. I'm going to take my hand out. I'm just going to flip it to the top side so that I can apply a bit of pressure, then downward through the grommets again, trying to keep that slider in place. The next move is the second S fold. So I'm going to hop off the canopy with my left knee, but I'm going to quickly try and snake my hand under the canopy and pinch both sides together so I can avoid it going left to right. Okay. Here I know I've got both sides because I'm able to kind of pinch it together. I'm going to take them, I'm going to fold it back on top of my right hand as I remove my right hand. Then I'm going to take my right hand and fold it back on top of my left hand as I remove my left hand. At this point, I like to take my knees, put them on both sides of the parachute. That allows me to control it left to right. And then I'm going to use my hands to control the top. I'll get all of this bunched up, and then I'm also trying to apply some pressure downward through the slider grommets. So, in order to fix all this, is pretty simple. I'm just going to bunch it together, fold it up, pull it under this top skin fabric right there, and hold it nice and tight. And repeat the same thing on the other side. So now all that fabric is minimized. I can control it just with one hand in here. Gonna lay my bag out with the flap down. I'm gonna gently lift up the canopy so I can scoot this flap under the parachute. And then I'm gonna just focus on pulling the bag around the canopy rather than trying to put the canopy into the bag. I'm gonna do it one corner at a time. So I'm gonna do this right corner first, just like that. I'm gonna put my knee down here to hold it in place. And then as I remove my left hand, I'm using my right hand to just clean everything up. And I'm using my right knee to hold the other side in place. Once this corner looks good, just pull the bag around, just like that. Okay, after I got the canopy in the bag, I'm just still applying some pressure to it to avoid having it fall out of the bag. With this canopy, I like to look down and make sure that my first S-fold, where the slider grommets are, is not falling out of the D-bag or falling out of the folds. If you do notice that it's falling out of the folds, it's probably because you made that first S-fold too large. You should try and make it maybe a little bit smaller, tuck the slider grommets in a little bit more to kind of keep them nice and secure in there. But I'm ready to start on my locking stows here. So I'm just gonna use gravity, kind of take my fingers, try and bring this rubber band to this grommet as best as I can. Once I get it to that grommet, poke it through. I like to flip up the bag at that point. I've got this, I'm using this rubber band to keep this grommet closed, which keeps the bag closed. And at this point, I'm going to try and get any excess that might be in these lines towards the canopy so that my lines are nice and straight and all of them are nice and taut. So I'm going to choke that up towards the canopy. And then I'm going to do my first fold, or my first stow. We're going to double stow every single stow, including the locking stows. Once I've done this stow, I want to make it about 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches, just like that. Next up, I'm going to, again, pinch some of that fabric closed so I can get the bag closed as much as possible. Get the rubber band through it. When you're pulling these rubber bands through the grommets, avoid trying to use the rubber band as like a lever to close the grommet or to close the bag. What that's going to do is just you're running the rubber band against the edge of the grommet and it can tear up your rubber bands over time a lot quicker. So I pull my rubber band straight out and then pull it back once I have it in the position I want, which helps kind of hold the bag closed, but I'm not running the rubber band against the side of the grommet. Then I'm going to create my next stow and go around my thumb twice to make a nice double stow. Repeating the same on the right side, just trying to get that bag closed as much as possible. Pulling on it. Going to come up a little bit. Trying to apply even tension on all the lines, as well as a bit of tension from the previous stow I made. That's going to allow the lines to lay neatly across the bag. One more locking stow. Prep it by getting the rubber band through. Applying a bit of tension both directions, creating the stow. Going twice around my thumb. Boom. All right, just like that. Now that we're done with the locking stows, I'm going to carry on with the standard stows. They are also going to be a double wrap though. So I'm going to apply a bit of back tension from the stow I just created. I'm going to run the lines tightly across the bag and trying to keep them tight with the container when I make the stow. Do a nice double stow. I like to just hold it tight as I get my thumb out of there. Repeating the same thing as I work my way up or down the lines, however you want to look at it. Holding back that last stow. Spectre it comes standard with an 825 micro line. That's what this line is. It's a nice line, lasts you a long time, and it is quite strong, so it stands up to the elements very, very nicely. Looks like I got room for about 2 more with how these are laying. We want to end our stows with about 12 to 24 inches of line between our last stow and the risers. So this looks like it could do, but I'm going to see one more and maybe finish with this one. Yep, that looks like about, let's say, 12 to 18 inches, somewhere in there. So that looks good. From here, I'm going to put the bag in the rig and close it up. Just make sure at this point, it's a nice time to double check that your brakes, that the excess is neatly stowed on the back and secure. And then go ahead and carry on with the packing. Hopefully this helps you in your Spectre packing. Hopefully you have some good jumps on it. And I look forward to seeing you out there. Thanks.